Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. Today, I have a wonderful, interesting guest for you. Her name is Dr. Jody Bearman, and she's a veterinarian, the owner of AnShen Holistic Veterinary Care. She's a diplomat of classical homeopathy and is certified in veterinary acupuncture, veterinary homeopathy, and veterinary spinal manipulation. And she volunteered to come on the podcast, and I'm thrilled that she did. Welcome to the podcast, Jody. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much.
Did I get all that right?
You did. You got
Okay,
everything.
good. I want you to correct me if I didn't. I don't want to mess up your intro. So the first question I always ask everyone, and I really appreciate you being here today, but the first question I always ask is to tell me your veterinary story, because I like to hear how everyone got started in this wonderful profession of ours.
Do you mean from childhood or from vet school?
Wherever you want to start. I love it all. So if you want to
Okay.
start from when you were a kid, if that's part of your story, then you can share it. If whatever you want to share.
Well, I definitely wanted to be a vet as a kid. Um, Not sure exactly when, but elementary age, I think.
Yeah, which a lot of us started out that way, right? Because we loved
Right.
animals or whatever, however we got started.
Right. My dog was my best friend, slept with me every night. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And crushing when she died. And actually our vet when I was a child died by suicide at the vet clinic. So, and I'm
No,
not a young
really?
person by any means. So this was going on way long ago.
Oh, wow. So I never heard anyone say that. I'm glad you shared that because I'm under the impression that that's a newer phenomenon, but I know it's not.
It's not, and one of my classmates too, and again, I graduated long ago from the University of Minnesota,
Right.
and my classmate who was my Carol partner in histopathology, um, he died by suicide after we graduated.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I mean, this is a long time. And even when I was in vet school, I heard of other vets at the time. So this is not a new thing happening.
No.
It's just that
Well,
we,
and suicide in general isn't, but
right.
yeah, ours is a tough profession and it always has been, right?
Yeah, it is.
Mm.
But it didn't deter me. And in fact, when I was in high school, way back then, um, when you went to see a high school counselor, they would do these tests, and the high school counselor is like, well, women shouldn't be vets.
Oh,
And you
interesting.
you shouldn't be a vet and you should be these other things. And I was interested in all those other things too, but I'm like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. and,
You
and
give
so,
give a vet a challenge, right?
right,
We all
exactly.
have that kind of personality.
Right.
You
Or we wouldn't
can't
be
do something.
here.
Yeah.
Right. So then I went to undergrad and I absolutely loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. I did bacteriology as my undergrad. I love any any biological sciences extremely much. I did a lot of research back then in molecular biology. I loved it all. And then
You're a
one,
nerd.
I'm a nerd. I'm such a nerd. I am such a nerd. Um, how nerdy am I? I memorized the entire Monty Python and the Holy Grail my first year in college.
No way. That's
Script. I would walk
hilarious.
around quoting it. I'm so nerdy, you guys. I played D&D in high school. I mean, I'm really, really, really nerdy. And,
Nice. That's okay.
and, and then one of my friends who was in organic chemistry with me is like, well, don't you want to be a vet? You should really apply because you're not going to get in if you don't apply. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I just thought that you couldn't get in. It was like impossible. So I wasn't going to do it. And my
Really?
and my boss wanted me to get a PhD and had it all set up for me to get a PhD in
Oh,
molecular biology. And so he was very upset when I gave him the application for vet school. He goes, no, you can't do that. That's terrible. That's a waste. And you shouldn't be a vet. I'm like, well, bacteria are nice and all, and bacteriophage. I mean, I like them, but they're not cute and cuddly. And I want
right.
to work with animals that I can touch and
Yeah.
stuff. So, anyway, because of that classmate, I did all the testing and I got in, and I hated it.
Really? You hated
I
vet
hated
school?
vet school.
No, really. No,
Um, I,
I actually think that's the first person on the podcast that's ever told me that. That's interesting.
oh,
I mean, we
well,
all kind of hated it on some level, right? Because it was so freaking hard.
you
But
know,
okay, tell me why. What happened?
well, I loved undergrad. I found it extremely challenging and extremely fun. I went to the University of Wisconsin, which is a blast. Madison is a very fun place to go to school. And I went
My
out.
son-in-law's from Madison, so I know the town a little bit.
So I went out a lot and I studied a lot. I mean, I worked hard and played hard. I got to
Right.
vet school and I went to Minnesota, which is where I'm originally from. So probably my biggest problem is that I went to Minnesota, which is where I'm from, and I had a horrible childhood, very traumatic.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that's a
So
big reason that I hated vet school. I was back in a place that had terrible memories for me.
so you
I
kind of had some PTSD about that.
I had severe PTSD. I'm not going to go into my childhood because you guys would all turn it off. But it was very traumatic.
Wow.
And anyway, I loved my classmates. Classmates were great. No problem. That was never a problem. Professors, a little different. But the beginning, well, there were some boyfriend problems too, which happens
Which
sometimes.
there are at that age in your life, right? Like we've all
Right,
been through bad breakups at some
right.
point in our life.
But the worst thing was that my parents decided to get divorced
Ugh,
at the beginning of my second year, and um, I had my life threatened, and so I left.
wow.
And so I left, and I had a great year off. I mean, it was traumatic too because it brought up all the childhood stuff. But
Right.
I took a year off. The people at the school
This is
said
after your sophomore year?
after my first year,
Okay. All right. Sorry. I wanted to make sure I had the time frame. Okay.
yeah. And they tried to get me to stay, and I'm like, I can't. I just can't. And I'd always wanted to travel by myself. And I took my waitressing money, which was cash, and I traveled. Back then you could
Nice.
cash.
Yeah.
And I traveled for a long time. And then I came back, and one of my classmates from my original class said, you should really just come back. Because I'm like, oh, I came back and I worked for a vet. I worked in a small animal practice and as like I don't know what you call, I just did stuff.
Like an
And most of what
assistant, veterinary assistant. As
well,
like,
there was one good vet there who was not the owner of that clinic, who was young and would let me watch and help with other things. But the owner of the clinic didn't want me doing any of that. And I had to clean the grout in the kennel runs with
with the
brush,
toothbrush.
with a
I've
tooth.
heard that story from other people. So
Yes.
you weren't the only one.
And I had to reuse all the syringes. So that's what I did. And so of course I hated it.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
so
Vets
I,
used to do that. They used to wash all that stuff, even the
right.
fecalizers. Do you
Right. It
remember
was
those?
disgusting. Yes,
I
yes.
remember washing those with my hands. I don't know
Right.
how I didn't die of parasitism, but
Right? Disgusting. And I had
Mhm.
never really been that interested in just doing small animal anyway. I'd always wanted to do mixed and especially large. And so one of my classmates from my first class said, hey, I know somebody who you need to ride with this person because we don't want to lose you. We want you to stay in school, but you need to ride with this person. So I rode with this wonderful vet, just fantastic woman named Holly Neaton, who was mostly I think just food animal. I don't think she did horses. And I rode with her and I was so happy. And it was like, this is my element. I love this. Plus,
You
she's
were back
nice.
in.
She's nice. We get to go to farms. We get to drive around. We get to work with cows and sheep and well, not horses with her, pigs and lots of small ruminants. And so then I went back and then I was in a different class and everyone was really nice. And it was okay. I mean, the classmates, great. I have the best classmates. I mean, I'm sure everybody feels like that, but I seriously do have the best classmates.
Better
And
than anybody else.
right. And I remember always thinking, I would tell people I would take my animals to any one of my classmates. I would anytime. They're
That's
just fantastic.
awesome. Yeah, you didn't have like one that you were like, oh.
Well, he dropped out.
Okay, there you go. They get weeded out, right?
Yeah, there were some issues there. Not with me, but
Right, right, right.
yeah. So anyway, so everybody that graduated, I really, really
You
love.
liked. That's
They're
awesome.
right. And a lot of them are already retiring. Gosh, that's so weird. But
Oh,
anyway, because we're that old. Um, but I loved, what did I love? I love my classmates. I thought that school was boring. So I thought undergrad was really exciting. It was really hard and it really used my mind. I had to write 30-page essays all the time for my bacterial genetics class and my physiology of microorganisms class. It was hard, hard in a good way where you learn something.
Right.
But that school felt like just memorization, and I didn't like that.
Cram it
Memorization,
in and spit it out, right? That's what I
right,
always felt like. Cram it in and spit it out is all we
right.
did.
And so that's not, it wasn't interesting,
Right.
I
Right.
guess,
Because you
until
didn't
you,
have time to really get interested and learn it. You just had to memorize it as fast as you possibly could because there was so much of it. And then
yeah,
you had to get those multiple choice questions right. And they would try to fool you. So you had to be really clever at taking
it's
tests. Yeah, it's right. You're right. The vet school part of it is not really conducive to learning, is it?
right. And it felt like my undergrad experience was so much about learning. And also, I worked in a lab where my boss was excited about it all the time. We were writing grant proposals and we were doing really fun things, working with
Right.
other universities and competing with them, like, oh, are we going to beat Yale this time? Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that was fun and exciting and working together as a team. And I didn't find that so much in vet school. Again, my classmates were great and we had study groups that were very fun. And that was the best part was our
That
study.
was the way to get through it, right? In a study group. I always say that to any veterinary student that I counsel or coach. It's have a group, even if it's just two people and yourself that helps each other study. Because I think that's the only way I got through, like literally.
Right. It just made it fun. And then you got to get to know the other people and, quiz each other and really learn it and have we had cards back then. I don't know if people still do that, but
Yeah, probably not.
yeah, probably not. But it was fun. That was good. And
Mhm.
then junior surgery came around, and back then we did all the surgeries, and
Yeah.
that was very distressing. And back then they didn't do um, spays and neuters for the Humane Society or anything like that. And so my whole class protested outside of the dean's office every day during lunch
Because of the animal rights thing or what? Because of
because
that?
we had to kill so many animals
In order
needlessly
to learn, right?
in
Yeah.
order to learn, which a lot of the things could have been videotaped, or we could have done spays and neuters of Humane Society animals, which there were tons of. And we're like,
Right.
we
And then
could learn a
recover
lot,
them and send them on their way to a happy home, right?
right? So that was hard. And gosh, just thinking about all these things, it just makes me love my classmates even more again. Um,
Because that's how
I,
we got through it, right?
right. But then fourth year, when you're in clinics, I loved that because you're doing
And
something.
it's real.
It's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
You're doing something, you don't get any sleep. I was there from like, 6 a.m. to midnight with most of the time, but I loved it. And then I started in mixed animal practice out in the middle of nowhere. And I did have other classmates who said, you shouldn't take that job. That guy just goes through people. And I'm like, but it's the only one that'll take me. And um, I I was really good at palpating cows for pregnancy. And,
Yeah.
and he noticed that, and that made me feel good, I think,
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
happened.
That was one of the reasons that you took the job is because you felt competent in something. Because we
Right. I
have
mean,
so much self-doubt when we first get out of school. Like we think we don't know anything. And yeah, it's really hard to go into a practice and be confident.
right. And I had no confidence. And I mean, other than I knew I could palpate cows for pregnancy.
Right.
And I knew I was excited and I could learn things, but I didn't feel good about myself. And I went into this practice and my boss, and there was no GPS, there were no cell phones. I mean, maybe there were, I don't even think they were back then, but we did have the little CB thing in the truck, but that was it.
Right.
And so we had to use plat maps.
Yeah.
We'll find the farms. And as soon as I got there, my boss goes, I'm going out of town for a week.
Oh,
And we had no place to
as
live.
a brand new grad.
Brand new grad. My boss is going out of
Ooh,
town
that's
for a week.
brutal.
It's a mixed animal practice, so we do emergencies. And my
Hmm.
husband and I couldn't get into the house that we were renting, so we lived in a county park in a tent
No way.
with
That's awesome.
two cats and a dog
In a tent,
in a
in a
tent
park. How
in a
did the
park.
Didn't the police come and say you can't camp here?
No, you could camp there, but it was so long ago and nobody cared about that place back then.
Right, right.
So we
That's
lived
funny.
in a tent in a park with our animals. I think
For
about
how
that.
long? Like a week or
You
longer?
know, I don't remember it. I don't think it was terribly long. It probably wasn't more than a week or two.
But very memorable if you were
It was
trying to work alone as a brand new vet and live in a tent.
right. And I don't know trying to think, how did I shower? I don't remember this.
This is an awesome story. I'm working on a new book where I want to tell all these veterinary stories. So you're going to have to contribute because this is a great one.
Oh, so many things happened. So I loved it. I loved practicing. I loved the large animal. I loved the small animal, but I was also scared to death. And the thing I was
Of
most afraid
course.
of was that I couldn't find the farms. It was so scary.
Yeah, you'd be lost, right? Then what would happen?
Right? Like they call up, at 10 p.m. I've got a milk fever or I've got a dystocia. They didn't say dystocia, but she can't push her calf out. And I'm like, okay, where are you? You know where the red barn is? By the big oak tree? It's,
That's
10
where,
p.m. It's dark out. I can't see
yeah,
it, right?
it's 1 mile past there, right?
And I can't call them because there's no cell phones, right? So you, and then sometimes it's an Amish farmer. You know where Irish Ridge is? No, it's a ridge of land. It's not
I
a
have no
town,
idea. Oh,
right?
wow.
And then he
No
goes,
address, right?
you know where Joe so-and-so lives? No. Oh, but you know where
I'm brand new. I don't know
Avalanche
anything.
is? And I'm like, I do know where Avalanche is. I'd been to Avalanche once. It's a town. It was a bar. It's just a bar. And so he goes, okay, go up the hill from Avalanche. Well, there is only one road, and I'll have my lantern out. Right. So these are
So you're
that
looking for a light on the horizon to find the place.
exactly. And I'm calling from my neighbors, so I'll walk over there with you.
Wow.
So I mean, it was exciting and scary because I'm like, what if I can't find it? If I'm driving around for hours and I can't find it.
Yeah.
But I did have some other scary things happen. My first, it must have been my boss hadn't left on his vacation yet because I think this was my first day. He's like, I'm sending you out to castrate 3 calves. And I'm like, oh, okay, no big deal. So I go out, I find the farm. That's no problem. It's daytime. It's regular work hours, right?
Right.
And the farmer takes me out in the back. Here's my calves. Oh, those are calves.
They
Those are
weren't calves.
bulls.
Oh
They're
no.
1,000 pounds
Oh
each.
my God.
And he had short sacked them. So
What?
I got out my pole syringe, I pole syringed them, and they went like this. Boom. And I'm like, can I use your phone?
You're
And
like, I think I just killed them.
that's exactly it. So I used his phone, I called the clinic, I talked to my boss, and I said, I think I just killed him. My boss goes, how much did you give him? And I gave him, I don't know, 0.3 cc's of Rompin back then. That's what we had. And xylazine. And he's like, oh, he starts laughing, oh, ha ha, you didn't kill me, but you better hurry up.
Because they're going to be up.
Right. And they're short sacked. So it wasn't like a minor procedure.
Oh man.
So they were all fine and they all got up, but I was sure I killed him. I was just sure, my
Oh
first,
yeah. What a feeling.
right. And then my first small animal one that I really remember was these people brought in this little kitten and she's got a tiny kitten, tiny, like half a pound or something. And she's got
Yes.
a hole on her face and I look and I can see
There's the little bug in there.
little
Cool.
cuter Rebra. And it's the first one I'd ever had because when I was
Yeah.
in vet school, I was an overnight technician and you have to do all the other stuff you do, but I worked as an overnight technician, but I'd never had a cuter Rebra. So I take her in the back and I thought, I can get this out. I don't think, because back then they're like, well, you have to give, all these drugs because you can cause anaphylaxis. And I don't know if they
Right.
still say that, but anyway, I popped it. It was huge. It was like as big as the kitten's head. And I screamed, I just screamed. And I went back in and I said, this is what we found. And they were just laughing and they named the kitten Grub. So those were some of the fun
Oh,
things.
how cute. That's an awesome story. I love that.
Right? So I have lots and lots of stories from all that. But then finally I had to move because my boss turned out to be really mean. And to the clients and to the animals, he threw his own dog, a pug, out of a second floor window.
No way. Oh my,
Own pug. And he would
Oh,
say horrible things about the clients, horrible things. And I'd know if he said something horrible about that client, I would really like them. That's what always happened.
right, right.
And
Wow.
I really
That's
liked the
sad.
clients. They were,
Yeah.
well, there were a couple. There was the guy who tried to tie me up after I palpated his cows and I had to run for my truck. And
Oh,
right. I mean, there were some weird things I could tell
yeah.
that.
Some
But
crazy stories. Yeah.
right. So I was sitting by the side of the road crying to my husband saying, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, I don't understand why you can't. Oh, and plus back then, I was working 100 hours a week and making
Right. Because you were
30,
taking your own calls.
right, $30,000 a year. So, and
Mhm.
I thought I was
Yeah,
rich.
that was
Really,
when we had to do our own emergencies. I mean, I worked small animal, but I had to go in for
right,
emergencies. Yeah. And
right.
waking up at 2 in the morning and going down to the hospital and doing a surgery and then going home and trying to sleep and then going back in the morning. It really sucks.
It really sucks. And
Yeah.
I would come back, lots of times they were really bad dystocias or something. So I'd be come back just covered in goo and I have to take a shower. And I mean, I have to say, I loved doing those, but
Yeah.
eventually,
It
I knew,
was truly like the James Harriet kind of life.
which I love James Harriet.
I know, me too. I just got through rereading all the books again because I hadn't read them in a long time. And I'm like, I gotta read that. I gotta read them again. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so good and being able to help the animals. So I've convinced my husband I couldn't do this job anymore because my boss was not nice.
Terrible.
And I just couldn't be around people who weren't nice to animals. I just couldn't do it.
Well, you can't support that. And if he's the owner of the practice, like, what are you going to do? You can't fire him. So you
Right.
kind of have to.
So we moved. And the next practice, I took that job because I liked one of the other vets, not the owner, but one of the associates. And I still really like her. She's great. She's a house call vet doing conventional medicine these days, and she's fantastic.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and thank you, Nancy. She was just fantastic. And they wanted me to do mostly large animal. Nobody else really wanted to, and I love large animal, so I was good with that. And my last appointment that was large animal that I had was a Jersey who had a right-sided DA. And she looked at me with her big brown eyes. And I'm like, hey, I can do the surgery right now, no problem. And he's like, oh, we'll just ship her. And I just cried all the way back to the clinic.
No. Oh, yeah. See, that would
It
be
happens
hard.
all the time.
Like, I can fix that. Yeah.
But I just cried. And then maybe it was right after that. I had to go see a bulldog C-section at 2 or 3 a.m. And when I was coming back from that, it was rush hour going in towards rush hour traffic was coming towards me, but it was a horrible snowstorm on April 1st of 1993. Of course, I'll never forget that date.
Wow.
And it was all ice and the truck was really bad, the work truck from work. And I had complained about it, as had the other vet, multiple times about how, because I'd had to go out to see a donkey dystocia in the middle of the night and it was just raining and it was like all over the road.
Wow.
And so this was an ice storm and it was sliding right into oncoming traffic. And so I'm like, well, I can't kill those people. So I pulled it over, rolled 3 times in the ditch, and
No.
the vet pack came through the back and hit me.
Oh,
And
wow.
glass everywhere. And I thought, this is going to blow up. I better get out. So I get
Yeah.
out and I didn't know where I was. And I'm wandering, wandering, wandering. And I realized it's my friend Nancy's house. I'm right in front of her house. And I knock on the door and she's like, oh, because I was just covered in blood,
Oh, wow.
and then my boss's wife, who was a technician there, who was really nice, came and got me. And she said to me, as she's taking me to the hospital, or no, she was taking me home from the hospital, she said, well, we just figured you're pretty lucky because we figured somebody would die in that truck. And I'm like, you are, but of course there was no recording devices. There wasn't anything, and it was
Right, right. And
a
yeah.
horrible
Oh, wow.
injury
That's
and
horrible.
it was bad. So then I couldn't work. So I couldn't walk. All the ligaments were torn off my neck. There was a local doctor who you had to see for insurance reasons. And he'd been written up in the paper after this, in our local paper, and saying like, this guy never says anybody has injuries and they makes them all go back to work. He said to me, you poor thing, they did everything wrong and all your ligaments are torn off. I can't believe you're alive and I can't believe you're walking.
What?
Yeah. So yeah. So that was a whole thing. And I had to eventually hire a lawyer and, yeah. So I was in chronic pain for about 16 years, after that, but I had to go back to work because I had to go back to work.
Because you
And
got to work. You got to pay off your
yeah,
bill. You got to pay your bills and all
right. But
that.
they said I couldn't do large animal anymore. So that was very sad to me. And so I went to a small animal clinic, and every night when I was done, I would lay on the x-ray table with my knees on my chest, on my back, and cry because it hurt so bad. My neck and my back,
Really?
so bad. And every night I'd cry all the way home because I was in so much pain.
Yeah.
So I did a bunch of, so I tried yoga, and I did PT, I mean, PT all along, but then they finally said I couldn't do it anymore because, well, anyway, that's just,
Insurance or something silly like that.
there was a lot of stuff with that. Yeah. So that's why the lawyers. And I started seeing a chiropractor, and that did help. And did some acupuncture. And at that time, it didn't help. It made me worse, which I know sounds really weird, but I think that person didn't realize how sensitive I was and that I didn't need very many needles and would put too many needles in me.
Okay.
And so I'm super, super, super sensitive to like everything. And um, anyway, eventually I paid off my student loans is what happened. And I went to a few different clinics. Oh gosh, it just goes on. I worked at a few different clinics, and eventually I paid off my student loans when I was at like the third clinic after that. Um, and I'm like, I'm going to just take Chinese medicine courses because I've always wanted to. And I feel like a lot of times there's, I can't even diagnose, much less treat a lot of my patients. And the answer is always euthanasia. And
Right.
I mean, I like euthanasia.
You wanted more options.
Right. I like euthanasia. I love you. I mean, I'm really glad we have euthanasia. It's something really special we have as veterinarians.
Right.
However, there may be other things we can do before that point that can really help. And I felt like I didn't know that, and I needed to know that. So
Yeah. And do you think that you were pushed towards that because of your own experience with pain? Were you like, I have to find better ways to treat these animals because there was no way to treat me? Like, do you think that was part of the progression?
for sure. And because even as a child, I identified with the animals because I didn't have a voice in
Okay,
how I was
yes, from
treated,
your trauma. Yeah, from your trauma.
right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Um, And even if I did use my voice, I wasn't heard or listened to.
Right.
And so I always felt like I was the voice for the animals.
That's
That's the
awesome.
point of me being here.
Well, and
Was
that's where the passion comes from. That's why you love it so much because
exactly,
you have a
exactly,
really solid reason that you do what you do.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's how I've always felt, and I still feel that way. And so very much so, that's kind of my driving force, is to be
Yeah.
the voice for those who don't have a voice.
Yeah.
So and there's more than that now, but that is the driving thing.
Yeah.
And so I went to Chi, and I did the certified veterinary acupuncturist for mixed practice, and I loved it. And then after I started doing it, I had kind of like a crisis of like, why is this working? I don't understand why this is working. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it, but it works.
Because it didn't have the scientific, like you were so used to that, biological scientific base. That was where you originally started. And this is more, I don't know what the word is, but just more woo-woo.
Right. And
Kind of like, how does this work? It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
and it is
Yeah.
scientific, and there is a lot more information
Of
now,
course. Right.
I could feel it. So I can feel the energy. And I bet we all can really, if we kind of get
If we
into
would tune
it,
in, right?
right? Right. And so
Mhm.
I'm like, well, but it works. So you know what? Who cares? But it did
Right.
feel wrong to me because like my kids, when they were little, I would just cite studies all the time. Where I say, you know what? Did you hear there was a study on that? And they did this, this many horses were included in this study. And it was,
Right.
I mean, I was very, very scientific, and
Yeah.
in the conventional way that we're used to, that we were taught.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so then I just kept seeing it getting better. So then I quit my job and I just started my own practice. And I started out calling it AnShen Veterinary Acupuncture. My kid came up with it. So
Tell me why the name.
my oldest child used to help me study. And she was pretty young. I mean, maybe she was like 8 to 10 when I was studying. And she would do my flashcards with me and stuff like that. She's
Awesome.
Of course, everybody says their kids are special. And I'm from Minnesota, so I'm just like Garrison Keeler, right? So all the kids are exceptional. But of course, if you don't feel that way about your kids, maybe that's something else. But I mean,
Sorry.
my
I'm getting
kids are
pickle.
I my kids are everything to me. And the next thing is my passion for helping the voiceless. So,
Right, right.
so
Well, and that's how it is, right? And that's one of the reasons that I got into coaching veterinarians because I had the same philosophy when I was running my practice. It's like the practice is one of my children, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing are my kids.
the
And so
action.
if I had to drop something at work or lose money at work, it was okay as long as I was doing it, to be with my kids or go to some
Exactly.
concert or whatever. So I agree with you from that standpoint. And I think many of us are getting that. We're finally getting that.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And it was hard because, you have to pay off your student loans and you only have
Of
so much time
course.
and
Yeah, of
it's
course. And
hard.
if you're an owner, you've kind of got to run the show. So you can't just
Right,
leave all the time. But yeah,
right.
there's a little balance there or a little, yin and yang of all that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and so my daughter said, I think you should call your practice AnShen Animal Acupuncture. And I said, you're brilliant. And because
Yeah.
she knew that AnShen is a
AAA.
point behind the ears that means calming the spirit. And she'd
Beautiful.
seen me do it on dogs. We had a dog at the time who had seizures.
Yeah.
And I would just put the needles in AnShen and her seizures would stop immediately.
Wow.
And so she, my daughter saw all this. My other child did too, of course, but they were
Right.
younger. So it was it, they were quite a bit younger.
Right.
But I said, well, you know what? That's perfect. I think I'll change it to veterinary so they know I'm a veterinarian. But yeah. So then I
Love that.
started that business and I still had a lot of clients that knew me because I'd already been in town for 13 years by then.
Right.
Excuse me. Um, so I started out not doing a ton and I didn't care. My husband was freaking out. He was
Because he
freaking
wanted you to bring in some money, huh?
He was so worried we weren't going to pay our bills. We had a little tiny house back then. No, were we in this house already? We were in this house. This house is bigger, but it's in a neighborhood that's considered bad, so it was really cheap. So, but we love our neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but people
Right.
can think what they want.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he was really, really worried, but it gave me a lot of time to spend with the kids. So both of my kids were in sports and they were in musicals, and I got to help with all the musicals. I got to do all this other stuff, and then I would just make my appointments around it. And
Yeah.
then
That's awesome.
it was great. And then I went back and I did my Chinese herbalist training and I did my Tuina training and then I did my food therapy training. And then one of my classmates from the herbalist class said, hey, Jody, could you do relief work for me sometime? I'm like, hey, Robin, don't you live in Hawaii? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, yes. My husband has to plan his weeks
Be
off,
happy to fly to Hawaii
right?
to relief. That's awesome.
Right. And my husband has to plan his weeks off the year before because
Right?
he works for FedEx and this is how it works. And so I said, we can't do it this year, but we could do it the next year. We could plan it. And so he did, and I went and I loved it. And
Yeah.
the staff and I got along great. And she's like, I'd really like you to work here. And I said, I really want to. My husband was again kind of freaked out about this whole idea. He likes things to be planned and not move.
Right. He's more of that kind of person, right? The
Right.
deep.
And I'm like all over the place. So we did move and I lived there for 2 years. And she also did, along with Chinese medicine, we did conventional medicine and we did emergencies because it's a small town.
Right.
And there aren't any emergency clinics on that island. And then we did Chinese medicine, but she also did homeopathy. And didn't mention this before, but I had studied with a homeopath with 3 of my classmates 1 year in vet school once a week for a year. I didn't think I got that much out of it, but I must have gotten something out of it. So all of a sudden it seemed like I kind of knew some things about homeopathy. And like she'd say, I don't know what to do with this case. You just see. And she said, you can look at my books, look at the books all you want. But we were busy. So she didn't really have time to help me with it because we were busy.
Right. Yeah. So you had to kind of learn it on your own.
So I kind of did. And I would have some kind of exceptional things happen. Like I had this one little dog that came in that she'd been trying to help for a couple years with this horrible, horrible skin problem. And so I said to the people, when did this start? A little white dog, of course they're going to have horrible skin problems.
Right. Right.
And they said it started when she was attacked by a big dog. She was scared to death. And for some reason, that training I'd done in vet school with this homeopathic vet,
Right.
I know that remedy.
It
Well, let me
clicked.
look it up in the book and see if it has these skin problems. And it did. And I gave the remedy and it completely resolved
Wow, that's
right
awesome.
away.
Yeah.
Years long problem. And I'm like, oh, I think I like this. And then I was there for 2 years, and then we had to move back because my father-in-law was ill, and which is a good reason to move back.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
right. And so
Back to Minnesota or
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin
We've
or
been in
Wisconsin?
Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah. I never did live in Minnesota after
Except
that.
for vet school.
Right. Then I
Okay.
was like out of here. But nothing wrong with Minnesota, but a little too close to family. And
Right.
so we moved back, and I had another vet take my practice and work for me while I was gone. And that worked okay. It was hard because she was kind of a newer Chinese medicine graduate, and I, did as much as I could, but I was working all the time. So
Right.
a better situation for both of us. And then so we were working together, and then the vet in Hawaii is like, I want you to do relief work still, but I want you to get the chiropractic training. So I went to the Healing Oasis in Wisconsin, which is great.
Interesting.
Really intense neurologic stuff. Really, really intense. It's way more than you learn in vet school. Is a diplomat in veterinary neurology. So he's like pushing that neurology, man. And I was
Okay.
getting old by this
That's
point.
good though, right?
It was, but I was getting old and my brain hurt, and it was so bad. I mean, I did graduate, I did fine.
Right, but it was tough.
Shortly after that, had my last period during that course. Shortly after that, I had a stroke.
Oh,
Well,
no.
so then I saw my acupuncturist several times. She couldn't help me. There's nothing really that they could do in conventional medicine. They kind of just like sent me home. And I went and saw a homeopath. And because I knew this guy who drew the blood at my doctor's office was a homeopath because we talked about it. And so I'm like, hey, would you help me? He's like, you know what? I would. And so he helped me. He gave me a remedy. I took it, and I felt like this thing that was going on in my head dropped into my stomach and was gone. And I,
What?
yeah, it was wild.
That
It was
is really cool.
wild. So,
Yeah.
so then I decided to take the veterinary homeopathy course. And
Because you
that
were
was
like, this is magic. This stuff is magic,
right.
right?
Right. And so that was good. I learned stuff, but I felt like I still didn't really get it. And I think my head wasn't 100%, better. It was a lot
Right,
better. It wasn't falling
right,
over. It wasn't spinning, all that kind of
right.
stuff. And I did see an ENT. They did the full workup, and they're like, no, this is internal. This is your brain. This was because the neurologist, one of the neurologists is like, you're too young and you don't have enough problems. And it couldn't be an actual stroke. Well, it was. So,
Yeah, one of my very good friends had a stroke when he was in his 30s. And I've had him on the podcast a few times. And now he runs a stroke kind of support group. And he's lovely. But yeah, he was very young and he had two strokes, bad ones.
oh,
Yeah.
wow. I
So it
wasn't
can happen.
I wasn't quite as young. I was
Right.
48, but still, it was
It's
horrible.
still young, too young to have a stroke. I mean,
Yeah.
anytime's too. Nobody should have strokes.
Right. But I did have autoimmune disease that was not fully diagnosed. My ANA is sky high, and it had been for a long time. I had a lot of problems starting after I had my second child. That does happen sometimes where you get the antibodies in your bloodstream from two different kids, and then you said, start making auto antibodies. So I had really a lot of physical problems after that.
Yeah.
And brain foggy. Well, really probably from the first pregnancy somewhat, but so that was a long time ago. She's 28
Yeah.
now. But anyway, the stroke was a lot worse. And seeing the homeopath really helped me. So then I did the veterinary homeopathy course, but I still felt like I didn't quite get it and I needed more support. So one of my clients goes, hey, I'm doing a human homeopathy school. It's a 4-year school.
Ah,
It's in Minnesota. You should
interesting.
call them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where my homeopath went. He was in
Yeah.
first or second class. So I called him right away and set up an interview, had to take a test, and then started like within a month. And it was completely different than any education I'd ever had.
Really.
Completely different. It's all about being supported. You are supported, supported, supported. When every class would start, it would start out like, so how are you all? and we could talk for hours and it was fine. That's what
Well,
they wanted. How are
maybe
you?
we could do that in vet school, right?
Right?
A little bit of that.
Right? It could be about anything in our lives. It could be about coursework. It could be about questions we had about what we were learning, but
Right.
it could be about anything.
Wow.
And then as we were learning, so as we're learning about these different remedies. So homeopathy uses less than Avogadro's number in most cases of a, of a remedy, a single substance that's been diluted and shaken until you get usually less than Avogadro's number of molecules in it. And as we're learning about these different remedies and the states of the remedies, sometimes they would affect us in certain ways. Like I remember one of my classmates was like, this one makes me so angry. Just hearing about this makes me so angry. And then we're like, everyone stops. And the instructor's like, tell us more about this.
Yeah. Tell us why.
Tell us more about how it feels to you.
Right.
And so it's this unbelievably supportive environment. And it was incredible. It
Yeah.
was incredible. And it's a 4-year part-time school. And then there's 2 years of student clinic. So during student clinic, you are in it, you're taking cases, and then they stop. You can stop at any time. We're going to take a break now. And then ask, I feel confused, or I feel I need help with
Wow.
this, or I don't
That's
know what to
really
say next,
interesting.
or this person's saying stuff and I don't know what to do. And the instructors are all like right there for you. Yeah, so here's some ideas. What seems like best to you, or how are you feeling? Do you want to go outside and walk around a little bit first for a little bit and then come back in and see how you're feeling? And I mean, it's just unbelievably supportive. And at this time, you're also seeing a homeopath. My original homeopath who'd helped me with the stroke had decided to stop practicing, so I started seeing someone else. And it's helped with, so it helps with not just a physical problem like the stroke, it helps
Right.
your whole being. You match someone's whole being,
Well, it
everything about.
sounds like therapy or coaching, right? Like you're talking about your feelings and you're talking about what you're thinking about, and like that's very healing,
Yeah, and we
mentally and
don't,
then physically, right?
and we really don't say anything other than tell me more about that.
Right. Yeah.
If once I get to know someone really well, once I've been seeing a human for a while, I might give very little advice. I mean, it almost never is, but very, very occasionally. I have one person I've been seeing for like 4 years, and I've known her for 25. I've been seeing her animals that long. So I don't advertise this at all. I just see the people whose animals I see, and they go, you've helped all my horses. What about me? Or you've helped all my dogs. What about me? I do large animals again too.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so then I'm like, okay, and I love doing the family systems because the animals want the people to feel better, right? I mean, don't you
Yeah.
see this all the time?
Yeah, there's that relationship, that human animal, and then put the veterinarian in there.
Right. And so, the animals want the people to feel better. In fact, there was somebody yesterday that I saw, and I was supposed to be seeing the 2 dogs, and she brought the 2 dogs in, and then she's like, they're looking at her. Normally they come running over to me, and they did, and they said hi and everything, but then they just sat and looked at her, and she goes, yeah, I think I need this appointment to be for me today. And that's what we did. And it was for her. And because and I said, I think and she goes, yeah, the dogs feel better just me talking. So, the dogs felt better because they knew it was time for her. The dogs are doing
Amazing.
pretty well at this point. So, um, yeah, it's kind of great. It's kind of
So
great.
now your practice consists of all these things.
Yes.
Acupuncture and homeopathy and everything for the animals and the people a little bit, right?
I don't touch the people. I might
Okay.
have to take their hand or give them a hug.
But you
That's
can
as
talk to
far
them
as it goes, but I can.
about how they feel.
Right. So I just listen, pretty much
Yeah.
just listen and tell me more about that. And sometimes
Yeah.
they'll say, can you tell me more about that? And what is that like? What is that like for you? That's how homeopathy is, because we have to really
Right.
know what as much as we can about the someone to match it to the single substance that matches them. And then when you give that, their body recognizes it as similar and their own being starts to heal themselves. Oh, I can't use that word heal when it comes to people. When I give it to animals,
You can heal the animals.
yeah,
Basically, right?
there's a lot of words we have to avoid when we're talking about humans.
So
But
did you say it's all large animal?
no, it's all animals. So I
Okay.
see any animals. I don't care.
That's amazing.
species at all. I mean, I've done fish and birds and um,
That's
horses,
awesome.
cows, sheep, goats,
Because I
pigs.
did exotics and I did a lot of bird medicine, and I would think birds could really benefit from a lot of this.
Birds are birds are great. I mean, they're so sensitive.
Yes.
You know, they're I mean, I remember doing conventional medicine and I had a canary breeder as one of my clients and I had a canary in my hand and it died. And she goes, "Oh, that happens all the time."
It
And I'm
does.
horrified,
Yeah.
but I'm like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
it's horrendous. That's why a lot of people don't like to do birds because they are so touchy and they're so good at hiding their symptoms. And so sometimes they're really, really sick and you can't tell, even as a vet.
right,
Like I've picked up a few and I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't realize how sick this bird was until I touched it. And then I was like, oh, put it back down quick.
right.
Yeah.
It's all just keel."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're very good at hiding it. So tell me how all of this accumulation of knowledge that you've accumulated and the fact that you run your own business, tell me how that makes your life as a veterinarian better.
Oh
Because
my gosh.
that's what I want people to hear from your story is
Yes,
you
yes. This is so
created your own veterinary life.
I did.
Like the book that I just wrote is called Love Your Veterinary Life, and I want everyone to love their life. So tell me
I
how you love it and how you created that for yourself.
So I love my life so much that I was just gone on vacation. And what my first day back of a long 12-hour day, I was so happy. I was happier doing this than I was on vacation. That sounds ridiculous. And it was a wonderful vacation. I saw a ton of
Right.
friends. Um, it was wonderful and a beautiful place. But
Right.
I was so happy to be with my
To
patients and
be
my
back.
clients. So part of it is that I didn't realize this when I was doing this. I didn't realize that when I chose to do these alternative routes, that I would only have clients that I really, really love.
Oh, so you can kind
So
of pick and choose them, right?
part of it
Well, and
is
they
that,
have the same philosophy as you.
yes, and then the other thing is that my appointments are very long. So an initial appointment is 2 hours
You get
and
to know them.
follow-ups are an hour, unless it's just adjustments, then it's half an hour to 45 minutes. But with these long appointments, I want to hear what the clients say. So I remember being in conventional medicine and just being annoyed. Just being annoyed. You're like, I only have 15 minutes, hurry it up. I don't want to
Like,
hear about
hurry
your whole
up,
life,
hurry
right?
up. Yeah.
Right. And now I'm just like, tell me more.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? So what do you think she's feeling when that's happening? The dog or cat or
And
horse.
that's so important. The people that own the animals know so much about their patient or about the patient. And if you just are open to listening to them, they will sometimes give you the answer.
Exactly.
I try to tell veterinarians that I'm like, if they say something like they want you to talk to their pet a certain way or sing to them or whatever, like listen to that because that is important to them. And sometimes they know better than you do what's happening. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
amazing.
And this is how I have to work to do homeopathy. I have to know. So I'll be like, if they had words, what would they say about this?
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good question.
So I need to know these things and I want to hear it. I need to hear it and
Right.
they want to tell me. And they are so happy to have someone to listen to them. And some of my clients are people that a lot of my clients are anybody would love, most of them.
Right.
But I do have some that probably other
That are
vets
difficult.
wouldn't
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah, we
love,
all have those, right? The people that
right?
you like, oh, this person's difficult, but I still like them.
But they might find them difficult because they want to tell you more. That's
Right.
why somebody would find them difficult, or because they might have specific requirements. But because I can and I want to hear, they're not difficult. Now,
Right.
not that I've never had difficult clients that I've had to fire owning
Sure.
on.
Everyone does, right?
There have only been a couple, and I remember them well. And and I'm good with that. So I have a practice manager, and if she says, you're not seeing this person, I'm not seeing that person. If she
Nice.
says, I don't want to deal with this person, I'm not going to deal with this person because she is worth her weight in gold.
Right. And you don't want to lose her.
I'm going to do everything in my power to keep her.
Right. Right.
So, she's fantastic. And I have an associate who is wonderful. We practice a bit differently, but she is so kind. And to me, the one thing, I mean, I don't care how smart you are. I mean, great. It's great that you're smart. We're all smart. I mean, we wouldn't have gotten to vet school if we weren't smart, right?
Right.
But smart isn't the same as kind. And so I have this wonderful, kind, smart, but kind
Right.
associate who is so kind. You just feel it coming off of her. And to me, that is the thing. That's what I want, because my whole thing is being able to be the voice for the voiceless. Well, I mean, they talk, but not in ways
Right.
that necessarily everybody understands. But she's that way too. And so I never want to lose her either. So when she said, I need to make more money, I talked to my accountant and said, what do we do? And he goes, you're raising your prices. You charge less than my groomer. And so we did,
Yes.
so, I have good people to ask questions of. I listen to them. I generally don't tell them what to do because I like when people want to do what they want to do and they do it well. And great. Now, if there is a problem, which I don't know that we've had in a long time, I guess with the beginning of COVID, my associate was a little worried. And I said, if you need to take time off and we just pay you, that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
You
Well,
do
and
what is best for
that's
you.
really what most people want. Like either you want to be the owner of the business, which you are, and I was, so you can make those decisions and be kind to your people and let them have a good life, or you want to work for someone that has that attitude. And that's
Like,
really what we all need to think about is who are you working for and do they have that kind of attitude where
exactly.
they'll let you practice the way you want to practice, but we all do good medicine and we all talk and collaborate and we all have a life outside of the hospital. That's kind of what we're all looking for.
Yeah. And I kind of tell her, you work as much or as little as you want. I don't care. This is your base pay. Anything over that, we do a super high percentage
Right.
because of what we do. It's different.
Because
It's
you have such a long appointment time, it would be difficult.
right. So it's a high percentage. And, but she's like, oh, do you mind if I go out of town again? And I'm like, you don't have to ask me. All you have to do is put it on the calendar. Just put it on the calendar and let our practice manager know. And that's fine. Now, if there's something really wrong and you need help with anything, I want you to talk to me. And we go out to lunch, fairly frequently so we can talk.
You're on the
Lots
same
of times,
page.
right. Lots of times we just talk about our lives. So, but I want to know how she is because I care
Right.
about her and I
Yeah.
want her to be happy. And I really care about her. She's an amazing person. She's not only a vet, she's a published author. She's an amazing poet. I mean, she's just incredible.
That is
So,
awesome.
and same with my practice manager. My practice manager has so many other things that she's so good at that I'm not. So,
But you have to hire for your gaps, right? Get
exactly.
somebody in there that's different than you are that you can collaborate with so you can teach each other things. I think that's a really good piece of advice.
And I think she might get a little frustrated that I'm somewhat not teachable with some of these things. I'm, try I'm trying. I really, really, really don't like some of the computery I mean, I use computer all the time, but that's the
Right.
kind of stuff that
But that's not your thing. You don't love technology and all that.
I like it and I use a laser and I do all this other stuff,
Right.
but I don't, right. I use it to help someone. If it feels like it's just busy work,
Or covering your butt because you have to have records, right?
I don't mind the records. I type while I'm a really fast typist. I learned to type when I was 10.
Yeah.
So I type while the people are talking. So I don't have trouble with records that way.
Right.
It's more like keeping up with the emails, keeping my email load
Mhm.
down. My inbox is ridiculous. And
Yeah,
that's the thing
it's not
that
fun.
she's
Yeah.
most upset with me about. So, um, but, I love it, love it, love it. I didn't know I could be happy like this. When I was doing conventional medicine, especially when I was at that practice after my neck
Right.
injury, I used to look across there. Kitty corner from us was a 7-Eleven, and every day I would look at that 7-Eleven and think, I want to work at the 7-Eleven. I don't,
Because it would be so easy, right?
don't
Just
want these
ringing up
responsibilities.
the pop and ringing up the hot dogs or whatever.
And I did think, well, they do get robbed sometimes. I wouldn't like that.
Well, yeah, that would not be fun.
Right. But I did have a guy come in and threaten to kill me once at that practice, in fact.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't know how I handled that like a boss. I think it was my trauma background, actually.
Yeah,
It was
maybe
like
you were strong
20,
enough to handle something like that.
right? I was like 29 and I'm like, sir, get in here. You are not to act like that. And if you take your dog now, your dog's going to die. And his dog did die, but that was okay.
Oh,
I mean, it wasn't okay for the dog,
right,
but,
right.
but yeah. Anyway, so it's just so much better to be able to have the comfort of practicing the way that I know is best for me is best for the patients that I see in the way that feels good to me, to be able to have clients who I really, really, really enjoy. Whole families that I see that all get to feel better. I mean, there is nothing better to have
Yeah.
people
Well, and
and your animals feel better.
I think the point about what you're saying is you have to know who you are and what you enjoy and how you want to spend your time. And if you can figure that out, then you can design that veterinary life that you want. Like that is kind of my philosophy. It's like I designed the veterinary life that I wanted, and everyone can do that. And the fact that some people feel helpless and hopeless in this profession is what I want to change. So we're going to run out of time pretty soon because I know you have somewhere to be. So let's try to kind of wrap this up with maybe one or two final questions, and then we can do this again. Because
Okay.
I feel like there's so much more that you want to say and that you can say. And so maybe now that we have your story and we have all of, how you got to be where you love it so much, maybe we can add some onto this. So I guess a good wrapping up question would be, what did we not talk about that you think is really important to get out there to any veterinarian of any age that's either struggling or, unsure of what their next move in life is? What would that be?
Oh, just veterinarians who are struggling. I think I would say if it doesn't feel right, it's not.
Okay. So like that, going in and feeling authentically what you're feeling and being okay with all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what if they need to be authentic and they're struggling with that? Like, what my message would be, get a coach, get a therapist, get a homeopathy person to talk to you, like something to help you navigate that.
I think all of that's great. I think all of that's great. One of the things I was thinking about before talking to you when I was driving home after my last appointment, was thinking that you need to find out what it is that you really like and do it. So even if it's like, I really love
And if it's
dancing.
not vet med,
If it's not, so like I love dancing and I love certain
too.
kinds of music that a lot of people probably wouldn't. I love Big Frida. I don't know if you know Big Frida, musician from New Orleans who is like bounce music. It's really fast and wild.
Yes.
And I love dancing like a completely crazy person.
Yeah.
And my animals love it too, actually. My dog is really into it. And so when I do that, I just feel better. And when I feel better, I can make better decisions.
hmm Yeah, like bike riding for me, I tap dance like that, and that's all important, right? You have to have that life where you're having fun as well as working, and even having fun in your work, in your
Yeah,
clinic, right?
exactly.
So tell me where we'll do this again for sure, because I think there's so much more we can talk about. But I don't want to make it too long where you miss your next appointment. Tell me where people can find you if they want to find out more about you. Where can they contact you? If they email me, obviously I'll pass them on to you. But what do you want them to know about you and what you're doing and how you can help them if they feel like a connection to you?
I am very open. I am not really great with technology, but the best way to get a hold of me is through my email. And it's Dr. Jody at AnShenVet.com, DRJODY at ANSHENVET.com. And if I don't get back to you, email me again. Hey, I think you missed this. You are not going to bother me. I am not bothered by that. I am never bothered by it. And I'm really open. I would be so happy to talk to any of you. Um, I'm in a lot of veterinary Facebook groups, so you might see me
Okay.
there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in quite a few of those too. Uh,
Yeah,
so if
and
somebody's interested in what you do and they're thinking about getting into it, like they could get some more information about all that from you.
definitely. And I really know how it is. I really know how it is because I've been there. We all have, right?
Fabulous. I
And
know,
I
right?
and I didn't even mention that I'd been suicidal multiple times through my career, which
Oh,
that's
wow. See,
been
we
gone
do
for
have
a
to
long
come
time.
back. We need to
Yeah.
talk about all that. Okay.
So
Well, we'll talk over email after we're done with this podcast or whatever. and we'll schedule again, and we'll do a second or third or fourth podcast with you. Because
Great.
I just think there's a lot more. Like I have a list of questions that we didn't even get to, and I just think there's a lot more to talk about, especially the whole suicide thing is important because I have not personally experienced that. I've had suicides in my family. And so I lost my nephew and I lost one of my cousins, but personally feeling that I haven't, even though I've had anxiety and all those kind of things, but I would love to talk about that. I think that's a really important thing. I think the more we talk about these things and the more we understand how normal all of this is to all of us humans, we all have issues
Right.
that's what we need to do. So.
Yeah. And I've never had an actual attempt, but
You've thought of
yeah,
it.
a lot. And my trauma background was.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's come back and talk a little bit more, don't you think?
That
Are
sounds
you willing? Did you enjoy this?
It was really fun. You're a lot of fun. I love spending time with you.
All right. Well, we're going to do more of this now that we know each other.
Great.
So everybody out there, if you want to get a hold of Dr. Jody, go ahead and email her or email me, and I'll put some stuff in the notes where you can just click and go right to her email. But I just want to thank you for being here, and it was lovely and fun. And this is Dr. Jody Bearman, and she is into all this holistic stuff, and her business is all about being whole, right? Like that's what we all want. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Any last words?
Thank you. And you guys can do it. Whatever it is, you can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, we'll be back again.
Okay.
Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, Jody.
Bye.